Welcome back, everyone, to the Key Learning Points Show. We're here for our sixth episode, and as always, we're diving into some really interesting insights from the world of personal development.
Always exciting to be back.
Today, we're focusing on three key areas that can make a huge difference in how you grow and really maximize your potential.
Sounds good to me. What are we going to cover?
Well, first, we'll be exploring how to actively develop your abilities. Then we'll move on to defining what your true priorities should be. And finally, we'll wrap up with some practical strategies for navigating culture shock, which I think a lot of people can relate to.
Yeah, that's a great mix of topics. Lots to unpack there.
Definitely. So let's jump right in and start with the first area, developing competence. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the first thing to really grasp is the distinction between having knowledge and having a skill set.
Okay, that's interesting. How would you explain that difference?
Sure, think of knowledge as kind of like having a bunch of facts stored in your brain. It's important, but it can be a bit like you know, if you don't use it, you lose it kind of thing.
Right, like memorizing information for a test, but then forgetting it later.
Exactly. Now, a skill set, that's different. It's the ability to actually do something. It might take a bit more effort to learn initially, but once you've got it, it tends to stick with you. Like riding a bike. You might wobble a bit at first, but once you get the hang of it, you've pretty much got it for life.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
I can definitely see how that applies to things like learning a language or playing an instrument. It's not just about knowing the theory, it's about being able to actually do it.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes skill development so valuable, especially in the personal development world where it's all about taking action and applying what you learn.
Absolutely. And one of the ideas that really struck me was this concept that you could be just one skill away from, like, significantly boosting your income.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it. If you, let's say you develop some really strong communication skills, or you become proficient in a particular software program that's in high demand, suddenly you've got something really valuable to offer.
Yeah, it's almost like unlocking a whole new level in your career or in your life in general.
And in today's world, it's not even just about having one specific area of expertise anymore.
You mean like the whole idea of being a specialist?
Yeah, I think that's becoming less and less relevant, actually. What's really valuable now is having what's called like multi-skills.
Multi-skills. Okay, I haven't heard that term before. What exactly does that mean?
It basically means having a diverse range of abilities that can kind of complement each other. So it's like, imagine someone who isn't just a fantastic writer, but they also understand marketing principles, or maybe they're really good at data analysis too.
Oh, I see. So it's kind of like building a well-rounded toolkit for yourself, right?
Yeah.
The more skills you have, the more equipped you are to handle different situations, and the more opportunities might come your way.
Precisely. And I love the way you put it, like a toolkit. Because unlike knowledge, which can sometimes be assessed through, multiple choice tests or whatever, skills are inherently demonstrable.
Oh, that's a good point. You can't just say you can code a website. You can actually show someone that you could do it.
Right. It's about applied ability. And I think that's another reason why it's so important to think about how different skills can work together synergistically. There's real power in being creative and venturing into new areas to build a unique combination of talents.
So it's not just about mastering individual skills, but also about thinking strategically about how those skills can interact and enhance each other.
Exactly. And that can lead to some really interesting career paths and opportunities.
Okay, so we've talked about the importance of skills, but how do we actually go about developing them? There's got to be some kind of roadmap for that, right?
Well, there is this five-step process that's been outlined, and I think it's a pretty solid framework.
Oh, tell me more about it. I love a good framework.
Okay, so the first step is to observe. So find someone who's already skilled in the area you want to learn and just watch them closely.
Right, like paying attention to their techniques and their process.
Yeah. Then the next step is to model. This means trying to imitate what you've observed, kind of like copying what they do.
Okay, so it's about learning through imitation, which makes sense.
Right. And then comes the most important part, which is to do. You've got to actually put what you've learned into practice, even if you're not perfect at it at first.
Yeah, it's all about getting your hands dirty and trying things out.
Exactly. And then you repeat, you practice over and over again, refining your skills each time.
So consistency is key. I'm sensing a theme here.
Absolutely. And the final step, which I think is really interesting, is to teach.
Teach. Oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. Why is that important?
Well, because when you teach something to someone else, it really forces you to understand it at a deeper level. You have to be able to explain it clearly, answer questions, break it down into smaller steps.
Oh, that makes sense. It's like you're solidifying your own understanding by having to articulate it to someone else.
Exactly. And by the way, this whole progression of learning a skill, it often follows a pretty predictable pattern.
Oh, really?
What's that? Well, it starts with what's called unconscious incompetence, which basically means you don't even know what you don't know.
Uh-huh. I've been there.
We all have. Then you move into conscious incompetence, which is when you realize, oh, I'm actually not good at this.
Yeah, that can be a humbling realization.
Definitely. But then comes conscious competence, which is where you can actually do the thing, but it still takes effort and concentration.
Okay, so you're starting to get the hang of it, but you're not quite there yet.
Right. And then finally, you reach unconscious competence, which is when the skill becomes almost automatic, like second nature.
Like tying your shoelaces or driving a car, you don't even have to think about it anymore.
Exactly. And I think knowing that there are these stages can make the whole learning journey feel less intimidating because you know there's a natural progression.
Yeah, it's not like you're expected to be an expert overnight. It's a process.
Precisely. And speaking of the learning process, there's this really interesting idea called the 100-hour rule, which I think can be quite encouraging.
The 100-hour rule, what's that?
So the idea is that if you invest around 100 hours of focused effort into any given area, you can potentially place yourself within the top 10% of individuals globally in that specific skill.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So it's like you're not that far away from becoming really good at something, even if you're starting from scratch.
Exactly. It kind of demystifies the whole idea of skill acquisition and shows that significant progress is often within reach, even for things like drawing, learning a new language, public speaking, project management, you name it.
So with dedicated practice and a structured approach, we can actually achieve a lot more than we might think.
Absolutely. And that's a really empowering message, I think.
I agree. All right. So we've talked about developing competence, but let's move on to another crucial aspect of personal growth, which is defining your priorities.
Ah, yes. Priorities. Such an important, yet often elusive concept.
It is. And there's this quote that I came across that I think sets the stage perfectly. There is no sense talking about priorities. Priorities reveal themselves. We are all transparent against the face of the clock.
Wow, that's a powerful statement. It really makes you think about how you're actually spending your time, not just how you think you're spending it.
Right. And it's easy to get caught up in this feeling of being constantly busy and overwhelmed,
Yeah.
like there aren't enough hours in the day. But often, the real issue isn't a lack of time, it's a lack of focus.
I think a lot of people can relate to that. We're all guilty of getting sidetracked by emails, social media, or just, procrastinating on the things that really matter.
Absolutely. And there's this idea that's been presented, which is to work all the time you work.
What does that mean exactly?
Well, it's contrasting the way most of us work, which is kind of scattered and interrupted, with the idea of being fully present and engaged in the task at hand.
Hmm. Oh, so it's like when you're working, actually work. Don't multitask, don't get distracted, just focus on the task at hand.
Exactly. And they even suggest that the average person's productivity during work hours is only around 50%, with the rest of the time being spent on things like, warming up to a task, socializing, checking emails, taking unnecessary breaks.
Wow, that's a pretty stark statistic. So we're essentially wasting half of our work time.
It seems that way. But the good news is that if we can improve our focus, even by a small amount, we can make significant gains in our productivity.
Okay, so how do we actually work all the time we work? Any practical tips?
Well, one suggestion is to implement dedicated focused time blocks. So maybe you block out a couple of hours in the morning where you completely switch off all distractions like email, social media, your phone, everything.
Okay, so it's like creating a distraction-free zone where you can really concentrate on the task at hand.
Exactly. It might be challenging at first, but I think the results could be pretty amazing.
I agree. And it's interesting because there's also this other idea that I think relates to defining priorities, which is the question of if you suddenly had an eighth day in the week that no one else had, how would you choose to spend it?
Oh, that's such a thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
It really forces you to think about what you truly value and what you would prioritize if time constraints were temporarily removed.
Right. It helps you uncover your true desires and what you would make time for if given the chance. And it's funny because there's this whole concept around the idea of time working for you.
Time working for you, what does that mean?
It means that once you fully commit to a particular activity or goal, you might find that unexpected pockets of time seem to open up. It's like once you've made that firm decision, the universe conspires to help you make it happen.
Oh, I love that. It's like when you're truly committed to something, the time you need will somehow magically appear.
Exactly. It's about taking that first step and letting the momentum build.
Okay, so we've talked about focus and commitment, but another key aspect of defining priorities is learning to eliminate the things that aren't essential.
Right. It's about being ruthless with your time and energy and making sure that you're only focusing on the things that truly matter.
And this also ties into the challenge a lot of people face in trying to incorporate beneficial habits into their already busy schedules, like exercising, meditating, spending time with loved ones.
Absolutely. It all comes back to effective prioritization. You've got to make time for the things that are important to you, even if it means saying no to other things.
And there are some really key insights about priorities that are worth highlighting.
Okay, like what?
Well, first, the importance of being organized,
Mhm.
like really taking the time to organize your time, your physical workspace, your digital files, everything.
Right, because clutter and disorganization can be huge time wasters.
Exactly. And then there's the idea that saying no time for something isn't really a factual statement. It's more of a reflection of its priority in your life.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not that we literally don't have the time, it's that we've chosen to prioritize other things over it.
Exactly. Time itself isn't the issue, is how we choose to allocate it based on what we deem important.
And I think that's a really empowering realization because it means we have more control over our time than we might think.
Absolutely. And perhaps the most important insight of all is that taking the time to intentionally plan and prioritize is absolutely essential.
Right, you've got to be proactive about it. You can't just let life happen to you. You've got to make conscious choices about how you spend your time.
And on that note, there are some really practical organize as a pro tips that I think can be helpful.
Okay, I'm all ears. What are they?
Well, first, make it a habit to regularly tidy up both your physical and digital workspaces. Clutter can be incredibly distracting, so keeping things clean and organized can help you stay focused.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. A clean desk equals a clear mind, as they say.
Exactly. And then invest in the organizational tools that work for you, whether that's a digital calendar, project management software, or even just a good old-fashioned notebook and pen. Find what helps you stay on top of things.
That's great advice. And it's important to remember that different things work for different people, so experiment and find what suits you best.
Absolutely. And here's a really important one. Actually schedule the time you will dedicate to specific tasks rather than just estimating how long they might take.
Oh, that's so true. Because Parkinson's law states that work expands to fill the time allotted to it. So if you give yourself a whole day to complete a task that could be done in a couple of hours, you'll probably end up taking the whole day.
Exactly. So be realistic with your time estimates and actually block out the time in your schedule for each task. And don't forget to schedule frequent breaks.
Breaks are so important. They help you avoid burnout and actually increase your productivity in the long run.
Absolutely. And finally, cultivate punctuality. Being late in one area of your schedule can create a ripple effect and disrupt other planned activities.
Yeah, it's all about respecting your own time and the time of others.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground on priorities. Let's move on to our final topic for today, which is dealing with culture shock.
Ah, yes. Culture shock. It's something that many of us have experienced or will experience at some point in our lives.
Especially in today's increasingly interconnected world where people are traveling and working in different cultures more than ever before.
Exactly. And I think it's important to start by acknowledging the immense value in embracing diversity and appreciating cultural differences.
Absolutely. Experiencing different cultures can be incredibly enriching, both personally and professionally. It can open your mind to new perspectives, challenge your assumptions, and help you grow as a person.
I couldn't agree more. It's an opportunity to learn and connect with people from all walks of life.
But it's also important to acknowledge that navigating new cultural environments can be challenging, and that's where culture shock comes in.
Right. Culture shock is that feeling of disorientation, confusion, and sometimes even anxiety that can occur when you're immersed in a culture that's significantly different from your own.
Yeah, it can be a bit overwhelming at times, especially if you're not prepared for it.
Absolutely. So, what are some practical things people can do to manage culture shock effectively?
Well, one of the most helpful things you can do is try to learn at least some basic phrases in the local language.
Oh, yeah. Even just knowing how to say hello, thank you, and excuse me, it can go a long way in showing respect and making daily interactions a little smoother.
Definitely. And don't be afraid to make mistakes. Most people appreciate the effort, even if your pronunciation isn't perfect.
Absolutely. And another important tip is to actively engage with local people. This could mean connecting with colleagues, attending local events, joining clubs or organizations, or even using apps designed to help you meet people in your new city.
I think that's key. It's about stepping outside of your comfort zone and making an effort to connect with people from the local culture.
Exactly. And if possible, see if there's a formal buddy system available through your work, university, or any other networks you might be part of. Having someone who's already familiar with the local culture can be an invaluable resource.
That's a great point. It's like having a built-in guide to help you navigate unfamiliar situations.
And it's also crucial to do some research and understand the local cultural norms before you go. This includes things like social customs, etiquette, workplace expectations, anything that can help you avoid misunderstandings and foster more positive interactions.
So it's about being proactive and informed.
Exactly. And remember, the key is to approach new experiences with an open mind and a willingness to learn. Don't go in with preconceived notions or judgments, just be curious and embrace the differences.
That's such an important point. Curiosity and adaptability are essential for not just coping with, but actually thriving in a new cultural environment.
Absolutely. And finally, don't underestimate the importance of staying connected with your family and friends back home. They can provide a sense of familiarity and support while you're adjusting to your new surroundings.
Right, it's about finding that balance between embracing your new environment and maintaining your existing support network.
Exactly. It's a process of adjustment and learning, and by implementing these strategies, you can make that transition a lot smoother and more enjoyable.
All right, so to recap for you today, we've explored three key areas for personal growth. First, developing competence by actively working on your skills through observation, practice, and even teaching. Second, defining your priorities to ensure you're focusing your time and energy on what truly matters to you. And third, effectively dealing with culture shock by embracing new environments with an open mind and actively engaging with the local culture. Thank you for tuning in. Till next time at the Key Learning Points Show.